Blackhawks Nation. Welcome to the Blackhawks Daily, your favorite recap of the daily buzz around your Chicago Blackhawks. I'm your host, PJ, and thank you for tuning in during this extremely slow and dry off-season. We've talked about this quite a bit. Not a lot going on. I say daily buzz. What buzz? There is no buzz. But, we're trying to scrape the barrel, keep us talking, keep that Jonesin at bay for when the puck drops on October 7th. For when the training camp starts in the middle of September, so that we can go headlong into this 100th season of the Hawks with some vigor and with some enthusiasm, because it's the 100th season, a centennial season of the best hockey team ever, and that's the Chicago Blackhawks. So let's take a look at what we got today. Seeing that it is the 100th season, it is totally fair for us to wax a little poetic about great teams and more specifically great players who've worn the beloved sweater. So when you're asked a question, who is the first legend that you think of when seeing the Blackhawks logo, it might be kind of hard to narrow that down. Older generations of Hawks fans might point to Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita. Some, probably my generation, will say Chris Chelios, Jeremy Roenick, Denny Savard, Eddie Belfour. The current generation, clearly are going to say Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, or that monster Duncan Keith. So who we got? The rich history of this original six franchise will be in the spotlight all season long, since the current team is not probably going to be making the playoffs, if we're being honest. So the talent still needs to be upgraded around Connor Bedard and for the Hawks to be a legitimate playoff contender. So we're going to be celebrating the past a lot this season. And there's a good thing. The good thing is that there is plenty of great moments and great players for us to look upon very fondly. So when asked the question, who's the first legend that you think of? Well, let's start a little bit more recently, but, pretty objectively, Patrick Kane is seen hands down as being probably the best player ever in Blackhawks history. He is a Hart, Calder, and Conn Smythe Trophy winner. The Hawks won 3 Stanley Cups with him on the ice. He scored the most iconic goal in team history with his overtime shot in Game 6 of the 2010 Stanley Cup Finals, when it found in the back of the net to clinch the team's first title in 49 years. Some fans, however, may go with Jonathan Taves. He did have a better overall game during those 3 Stanley Cup runs during the last decade. Taves is just as much of an icon in Chicago as Kane was. Taves also was the captain. Maybe he is your answer for the most player when you think of, or the most obvious player when you think of the Hawks logo. There's a generation of Hawks fans who grew up with the great Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita. Mikita played 22 seasons in Chicago, where he was the Blackhawks' all-time leading scorer. He won the Hart trophies, 2 Hart trophies, and the Stanley Cup. Hull is the Hawks' all-time leading goal scorer. Mikita was the all-time leading scorer. Hull is the all-time leading goal scorer. They both won the Stanley Cup in 1961. And before Kane and Taves, Hull and Mikita were the most iconic hockey duo in Chicago. And if you grew up with the Blackhawks in the 70s through the 90s, the Hawks had some great teams. Did not obviously win the Stanley Cup, but maybe you grew up loving Tony Esposito, Keith Magnuson, Denny Savard, Steve Larmer, Jeremy Roenick, Chris Chelios, Eddie Belfour, Tony Amonte, even Patrick Sharp. These legends may or might be some of the first names that you think of when it comes to great players. Really, though, it all comes down to how you view Kane. He was a great offensive player, but he was never going to provide you a lot of defensive support. And then again, he was a winger, so that's really not his job. Kane also played with some other iconic players not named Jonathan Taves. He had Duncan Keith, who was a Norris Trophy winning defenseman on those championship teams. Corey Crawford was amazing in goal during that dynasty. Marian Hossa is one of the best free agent signings, not only in the Blackhawks history, but in Chicago sports history. Dennis Rodman's another one. I mean, there's only a few that are huge for the team and the city, and Hossa is one of them. Bedard has the talent to reach icon status officially someday, but you know what? We have an embarrassment of riches. Having all these choices makes it really hard when you think of who is the first legend that you think of when you think of the Hawks logo? For me, honestly, it's Chris Chelios. That's who I think of when I see the Hawks logo. I think of Chelios. I always will. First game I ever went to was in 1992 at the Chicago Stadium against San Jose Sharks, and Chelios got into a fight, and I just remember watching him and watching that hair fly, and I was hooked. I was hooked. So, who's your legend that you think of when you see the sweater? Moving on from there, what do you guys think is a fair expectation to have for our young Mr. Connor Bedard entering his third season? So, by far, he's been the most productive Blackhawk offensively over the last two seasons. Fair or unfair, he hasn't really quite lived up to the title of generational superstar yet. He's got the talent, but he just hasn't done it. We have complete confidence in this guy, right? As he enters his 20s, remember, he just turned 20, like literally weeks ago. I expect that his on-ice production will finally begin to silence his doubters and his critics, right? We just need to get people around him. Before diving into what would be a fair statistical expectation for Bedard's third NHL season with the Blackhawks, let's address where heightened expectations for Bedard are coming from. First and foremost, fans of other teams are preying on his downfall simply because of the crest he wears. The Blackhawks are easily one of the most despised franchises in the NHL for non-Chicagoans. We're just hated, but fans hate the Hawks, so they root against them and their players. And you know what? Screw them. We love the Hawks, so they can go bite it. Beyond that, though, the NHL's newfound obsession with one Macklin Celebrini has resulted in the downplaying of Connor Bedard's potential. Fans who despise Chicago are quick to celebrate the young Shark superstar as the true generational talent. Lord knows the kid's got talent. You can't deny that. But it's kind of funny because Connor Bedard had a better rookie campaign in fewer games than Celebrini did. But whatever. Celebrini, exceptional player. But he's not Connor Bedard. Bedard will begin proving his prowess this season. And if we look back at other generational franchise-level players and their third seasons, go through the list. It's kind of interesting, but you can kind of formulate an idea of where Bedard might land and what he might do this year. But let's actually start with two Hawks legends. Let's look at Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews in their third years. In year 3, Patrick Kane put up 30 goals, 58 assists, and had 88 total points. He ended the season a plus 16, led the Hawks to a Stanley Cup that summer, and he scored his famous phantom goal, triggered the greatest run of success in Blackhawks history. And those are massive shoes to fill, but remember, we're only talking about the statistical expectations of Bedard, not whether or not the Hawks are going to win a cup, especially this year, because they're not going to be close this year. Toews put up 25 goals and 43 assists for 68 points. He ended the season with a plus 22. His impact extended far beyond the score sheet because he was a dynamic two-way center tasked with defending the opposing team's best players, and while also being tasked with contributing offensively. So again, large shoes to fill. So what are we anticipating for Bedard's stats in year 3? I think a fair expectation is somewhere between the seasons of like a David Pastrnak or a Steven Stamkos. So Pastrnak out of Boston, he had 70 points his third year. Steven Stamkos had 91 points in the third year. So, it's a wide range, right? Got that. But I'd say, 30 to 35 goals, maybe 40 to 55 assists is fair. Just depends on what line he's on, who's playing with him. That would be probably the max expectation for Bedard is right around 90 points. And the minimum, with all the off-season training that he's been doing, probably around 70 points. So let's say he lands in the middle, 34 goals, 46 assists, 80 points in about 80 games. Let's hope that he can minimize his plus minus. I think he may be negative again, but let's hope it's closer to 0, like a -4 to 10 tops, right? If Bedard becomes a true point per game player by year 3, which he can be, before the team is even talented enough to keep up with him, oh, what a massive win it would be for us. I'm looking forward to seeing what Bedard can do in his 3rd season. And remember, it's only going to get brighter from here, right? He's maturing. He's getting his legs under him. He's really actually focusing on the small minutia of the game. He's coming a long way. He's getting a stiffer stick. Oh, he's going to be great. Moving on from there. Number 3, the Chicago Blackhawks. This is actually, so you know about the UC and you know about the Chicago Stadium. We've talked about both of those places. I do want to do a better deep dive into Chicago Stadium, but before the Chicago Stadium, there was another place that the Blackhawks played, and they did not stay in that first home arena for very long. They played for 2 seasons at the Chicago Coliseum before moving to Chicago Stadium. And, so as we know, a major focus this year is going to be talking about the history, so let's talk about a little bit of that. The franchise, the original 6 team, we're going to have a lot of celebrations, a lot of promotions going on this season. And you know what? It's great because it's a little bit of a distraction because the team's not expected to be very good. So let's relive some of these older days. The iconic stadium where Bobby Hall and Stan Mikita dazzle the crowd on a nightly basis, we're going to get into, right? Fans could watch Tony Esposito and Glenn Hall make scoring nearly impossible for the visitors. Jeremy Roenick, Chris Chelios, Eddie Belfour almost sent the old stadium out in style by nearly winning one last Stanley Cup in 1992. The Hawks won 3 championships while playing at the Madhouse on Madison. The franchise also lost 4 Stanley Cup finals there. Many great moments in franchise history happened at Chicago Stadium. It was a fantastic building. However, that was not their first home stadium. The Chicago Coliseum was the Hawks' first home venue. The Hawks played their first 3 seasons at 1513 South Wabash Avenue from 1926 to 1929. And they didn't have much success there after the inaugural season. They went 12-8-2 at home during their first season. And then after that, the team won just 2 home games during their 27-28 season. And then they won just 3 home games during the final season at the Coliseum. And then they moved to the newly constructed Chicago Stadium in the 1929 to 1930 season. The Coliseum could hold between 6,000 to 12,000 patrons, so really kind of tiny, or definitely smaller than today's standards. It's probably better remembered for the political and musical events that were held there. President Warren G. Harding earned the Republican nomination in 1920 there. The term smoke-filled room came from how Harding got the nomination from the wheeling and dealing that went on behind the scenes. Of note, the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, and the Grateful Dead all played there. The Coliseum was closed after multiple fire code violations in 1971, and it was finally demolished in the early 80s. So, a little piece of Chicago history going bye-bye there. Finally, we got some hot takes, and actually we only got one, and it's from a beloved repeat offender, and that would be Beans 7014. And Beans says, "I'll go to the end of my days with a special place in my heart for Rocky Wirtz." And you know what? Agree with you. Once Rocky got the helm, he absolutely turned the Hawks around. We talked yesterday about how ESPN, the magazine, back in 2004, I think, had the Hawks ranked dead last of all 121 professional sports teams in the U.S. or in North America. We were dead last, and they were taking account of merchandise sales and fan attendance and quality of product on the field or ice and just a bunch of different things. We were dead last, and Rocky Wirtz turned it around on its head. And after he came in, I think after literally 2 or 3 years, we were in the top. I think we're in the top 5 of best franchises. So, Beans, totally with you, my man. I hear you, and I agree with you. Rocky Wirtz did an amazing job, and he did us right. And I think that kind of energy propelled us to the decade of dominance that we had. And hey, let's bring it again, right? Let's bring that energy into the centennial year. Let's just go, Hawks. Let's just go. So that's a wrap for today, folks. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for keeping up, tuning in, providing your comments and all that kind of stuff. One thing that you've noticed is I just do one shot, right? I don't re-record these things. I don't do edits. I just do one shot. So you get all my flubs, you get all my mispronunciations, because a lot of these names are hard. And you get all of my stumbles and fumbles and all that kind of stuff. But, hey, I'm human, and I'm just putzing around here, having fun with you guys. So I appreciate you going on this ride with me. Thank you so much for tuning in every weekday. Thank you for, liking the channel and subscribing and just spreading the word. I really appreciate it. So thank you very much for all of your input. Thank you very much for being on this ride with us. Let's go, Hawks. I will see you next time. That's it for today. I'm PJ. See you next time on the Blackhawks Daily.